My name is Elena. I am 32 years old, and I used to own the most prestigious art gallery in Chelsea before I became what society calls a trophy wife. My husband suddenly fired our housekeeper, accusing her of stealing his luxury watch. But before she left, she slipped me her old burner phone and said, "Listen to the recordings, ma'am." I was shocked when I heard what was on it. Before I tell you what I found on that phone and how I made them pay, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever trusted the wrong person only to realize they were holding a knife behind your back the whole time. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday evening in our Southampton estate. The kind of night where the only sound is the ocean breeze rattling the French windows and the distant hum of the pool filter. But at 8:15 my world shattered. Blue and red lights slashed through our living room, painting the cream-colored walls in violent shades of authority. The silence was replaced by the crackle of police radios and the heavy thud of boots on our hardwood floors. My husband Jason was standing by the marble fireplace, his face twisted in a performance of righteous indignation that would have won him an award. He pointed a trembling finger at Maria, our housekeeper of 5 years. "Officer, I want her arrested immediately," he shouted, his voice cracking just enough to sound devastated. "She stole my Patek Philippe. That watch is worth $50,000. It was an heirloom." I rushed down the spiral staircase, my silk robe trailing behind me. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This had to be a mistake. Maria was 60 years old. She had been with us since the day I moved into this mausoleum of a house. She was the one who made me soup when I had the flu, not Jason. She was the one who knew exactly how I took my coffee and how to arrange the hydrangeas just the way I liked them. She was the only person in this house who looked at me with genuine warmth. I grabbed Jason's arm, my hands shaking. "Jason, stop," I pleaded, my voice sounding small in the cavernous room. "Maria would never steal from us. Let me check the safe again. Maybe you misplaced it. You know you have been stressed lately." Jason did not just pull away. He shoved me hard enough that I stumbled back and had to catch myself against the grand piano. The noise of my hip hitting the wood echoed through the room, but the police officers were too busy reading Maria her rights to notice. Jason turned to me. His eyes, usually a charming hazel that had seduced half the investors on Wall Street, were now cold and dead. He leaned in his expensive cologne, suffocating me, and hissed into my ear so low that only I could hear, "Shut your mouth, Elena. Do you want them to see how unstable you are? Do not make them think you are as crazy as she is. Go back upstairs before you embarrass me." I froze. The word crazy hit me like a physical slap. Lately, that was his favorite word. "You are forgetting things, Elena. You are acting erratic, Elena. You are losing your mind, Elena." He had said it so many times over the last few months that I had actually started to believe him. I stood there paralyzed, watching as two burly officers grabbed Maria's thin wrists. She did not fight. She did not scream or beg for mercy as I expected her to. Instead, she looked at me. Her dark eyes were filled not with fear for herself, but with a terrifying pity for me. It was a look that sent a shiver down my spine, colder than the air conditioning. As they led her past me toward the front door, she feigned a stumble. Her shoulder hit mine, a clumsy collision that made the officer grunt in annoyance. But in that split second of contact, I felt something hard and cold press into my palm. I instinctively closed my fingers around it, hiding it within the long sleeve of my robe. It was a phone. A cheap plastic burner phone, warm from her pocket. As the officer pulled her upright, she turned her head slightly. Her lips barely moved, but I heard it clearly, as if she had shouted it. "Listen to the recordings, ma'am, and for the love of God, don't drink the tea." The heavy oak door slammed shut, cutting off her voice. The police siren wailed, fading into the distance, taking the only ally I had left in this world away in the back of a squad car. I was left standing in the foyer, clutching a piece of plastic that felt like a grenade, staring at the man I had married 3 years ago. Jason let out a long, dramatic sigh, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He turned to me, the monster who had hissed in my ear gone, replaced once again by the concerned, doting husband. "I am so sorry you had to see that, darling," he said, walking over to wrap his arms around me. I stiffened, my skin crawling at his touch. I tried to pull away, but he held me tighter. "I knew you were too soft on her. This is why I handle the finances, Elena. You trust people too easily. It is a symptom of your condition. My condition." There it was again. 6 months ago, I was a sharp, capable woman who could negotiate a 6-figure art deal without blinking. Now, according to Jason and the doctors he hired, I was fragile. I was suffering from early onset nervous exhaustion. I had headaches that blinded me and memory gaps that terrified me. I would wake up in the middle of the day not knowing how I got there. I assumed it was stress. I assumed it was grief from losing my parents. But Maria's words echoed in my mind. "Don't drink the tea." "Come on," Jason cooed, guiding me toward the kitchen like I was a toddler. "You are shaking. You need to calm down. I will make you your special herbal tea. It will help you sleep." My blood ran cold. Every night for the past 6 months, Jason had made me that tea. He prepared it himself, insisting it was his way of taking care of me since I was no longer working. He said it was a blend of rare herbs his naturopath recommended for anxiety. I drank it religiously, grateful for his care. And every night, 20 minutes after drinking it, the fog would roll in. My limbs would feel heavy, my thoughts would turn to mush, and I would drift into a deep, dreamless sleep, only to wake up groggy and confused the next day. I clutched the burner phone tighter in my sleeve, the sharp edges digging into my skin, grounding me. I watched him move around the kitchen. The kitchen was a masterpiece of modern design, all stainless steel and white marble, cold and clinical. Jason filled the kettle, his movements precise and practiced. He looked so normal, so handsome in his white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked like the man who had swept me off my feet at a gallery opening, the man who promised to protect me from the sharks of the business world. How could a man who looked like that be capable of what I was starting to suspect? "Sit down, Elena," he said, placing a mug on the island counter. The steam rose from it, carrying a scent I had come to associate with comfort, chamomile, peppermint, and something else, something sweet and slightly metallic, like almonds. I sat on the high stool, my legs trembling. I needed to get away. I needed to be alone to listen to whatever was on this phone. But if I refused the tea, he would get suspicious. He was watching me closely, his eyes narrowing slightly as I hesitated. "Is something wrong?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave. "You look pale. Do you not want it?" "You know the doctor said you need to stay hydrated and calm." I forced a smile. It felt like my face was made of plaster. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I am just shaken." Poor Maria. I just cannot believe she would do that. Jason scoffed, turning back to the fridge to get some ice. "People are not always who they pretend to be, Elena. You of all people should know that. The sooner she is in jail, the safer our assets will be." I stared at the back of his head. People are not always who they pretend to be. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I took the mug in my hands. It was warm. I brought it to my lips, feigning a sip, but kept my mouth tightly closed. I made a swallowing sound, then set the mug down. "I am going to take this upstairs," I said, sliding off the stool. "I have a migraine coming on. I just need to lie down in the dark." Jason turned around, analyzing me. For a second, I thought he was going to stop me. I thought he was going to demand I drink it right there in front of him. My heart stopped. If he stopped me, if he found the phone, I knew with a terrifying certainty that I would not be just confused tomorrow. I might not wake up at all. But then he smiled, a benevolent, condescending smile. "Of course, darling. Go rest. I have some calls to make to the lawyers to ensure Maria does not get bail. I will come check on you later. Make sure you finish every drop. It is good for you." I nodded, clutching the mug in one hand and hiding the phone in the other. I walked out of the kitchen, feeling his gaze burning into my back until I turned the corner. As soon as I was out of his sight, I ran. I ran up the stairs, my bare feet silent on the carpet. I rushed into our master bedroom and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the mug. I marched straight to the bathroom, poured the steaming liquid down the sink, and ran the tap until every trace of the amber fluid was gone. Then I sat on the edge of the bathtub and pulled out the phone. It was an old Nokia, the kind with buttons that clicked loudly. It had 15% battery left. I took a deep breath. My hands were trembling, not from the condition, but from pure adrenaline. I pressed the menu button and navigated to the voice recordings folder. There was only one file. It was dated yesterday. I pressed play. The sound was grainy, at first the rustling of fabric as if the phone had been hidden in a pocket or under a cushion. Then voices cut through the static. One was Jason's. The other was a woman's voice, smooth, confident, and familiar. Too familiar. It was Sarah. My best friend from college, the woman who had been my maid of honor, the woman who was currently my family lawyer. The recording started mid-conversation. "She is getting worse," Jason's voice said. He sounded annoyed, not concerned. "I upped the dosage last week, but she is still lucid in the mornings. How much longer do I have to play Nurse Sarah? I am sick of it." Sarah laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "Patience, lover. You cannot rush these things. If she dies too suddenly, there will be an autopsy. We need the long game. We need her declared mentally incompetent first." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a scream. Tears pricked my eyes hot and stinging. "Just keep giving her the tea," Sarah continued. "The compound builds up slowly. By the time the charity gala comes around next week, she will be hallucinating in front of the entire board. Once Dr. Evans certifies she has lost her mind, the conservatorship is yours. And so is the $50 million in her trust fund. $50 million. My parents' legacy. The money I had saved to open art schools for underprivileged kids." Then Jason spoke again, and this time his voice made my blood turn to ice. "Good, because I'm done with her. Looking at her pathetic, confused face every day makes me want to vomit. I cannot wait to throw her in a facility and finally be with you openly." The recording ended with the sound of them kissing. I sat there in the silence of the bathroom, the burner phone slipping from my numb fingers onto the bath mat. The man I loved was not just cheating on me. He was poisoning me. He was gaslighting me into insanity so he could lock me away and steal my fortune with my best friend. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked pale gaunt with dark circles under my eyes. A victim. A fragile, broken woman. But as I stared into my own eyes, something shifted. The fear that had been paralyzing me for months began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard rage. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips, steadying them. They thought I was weak. They thought I was crazy. They thought they had already won. I picked up the phone and tucked it safely into the pocket of my robe. I splashed cold water on my face, washing away the tears. When I looked up again, Elena, the victim, was gone. Jason wanted a crazy wife. He wanted a show for the gala next week. I wiped my face with a towel. Fine, I would give him a show, but it would not be the one he wrote. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back into the bedroom. The game had changed, and for the first time in 6 months, I was the one holding the controller. The house was silent, wrapped in the heavy, suffocating velvet of a Hamptons night. The only sound in the master bedroom was the rhythmic, peaceful breathing of my husband. I lay there, rigid, staring at the ceiling, where the moonlight cast long, skeletal shadows through the sheer curtains. Jason was asleep. He was deeply, soundly asleep, his chest rising and falling with an infuriating calmness. Just hours ago, he had played the role of the devastated victim to perfection, lamenting the betrayal of our trusted housekeeper while sipping scotch with the police officers. He had shed a single perfect tear as they drove Maria away. Now he slept like a baby, unburdened by conscience, his arm thrown carelessly over the space where I usually lay. I moved inch by inch, sliding my body out from under the Egyptian cotton sheets. Every rustle of the fabric sounded like a thunderclap to my heightened senses. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage beating so hard I was terrified he would hear it. I paused as my bare feet touched the cold hardwood floor, holding my breath, watching him. He shifted slightly, murmuring something unintelligible in his sleep, and a smile ghosted across his lips. That smile. It was the same smile he gave me when we exchanged vows. The same smile he wore when he took over my family's foundation. It made my stomach turn. Clutching the hem of my silk robe, I crept toward the bathroom. The distance was only 20 feet, but it felt like a mile across a minefield. I slipped inside and closed the door, turning the lock with agonizing slowness. The soft click echoed in the tiled room, final and absolute. I did not turn on the main lights. I could not bear the harsh glare of reality just yet. Instead, I switched on the small vanity lamp, casting a dim golden glow over the white marble and gold fixtures. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I reached into the deep pocket of my robe and pulled out the burner phone Maria had pressed into my palm. It was an old, battered device, the plastic casing scratched and worn, a stark contrast to the sleek, $1,000 smartphones Jason and I used. It felt heavy in my hand, weighted with a truth I was terrified to uncover. My thumb hovered over the power button. I hesitated. Part of me, the part that still loved the man sleeping in the next room, wanted to throw this phone into the toilet and flush it away. I wanted to go back to bed, wake up tomorrow, and believe that Maria was a thief and Jason was my protector. I wanted the lie. The lie was safe. The lie was warm. But then I remembered Maria's eyes. I remembered the desperate urgency in her voice when she told me not to drink the tea. Maria had never lied to me, not once. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, bathing my face in a harsh blue light. The battery icon blinked red. I had to be quick. I navigated the clumsy, outdated menu to the voice recorder. There was a single file dated 2 days ago. My finger trembled as I pressed play. I held the phone up to my ear, pressing it so hard it hurt, straining to hear over the thumping of my own pulse. The audio started with the sound of a door closing, then footsteps, heavy, confident strides on hardwood. Finally, he is gone. I froze. That was Sarah's voice, my best friend, the woman who had held my hand at my mother's funeral, the woman who was the executor of my will. She sounded annoyed, impatient. "Did you check the perimeter?" Jason's voice answered. It was not the soft, doting tone he used with me. It was sharp, commanding. "Yes, Maria is in the garden. She won't hear us. Now tell me, did she drink it?" My breath caught in my throat. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my eyes widening in horror. "Every drop," Jason said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "I made it extra strong tonight. The new blend you gave me masks the bitterness of the scopolamine perfectly. She just thinks it is premium chamomile. Scopolamine." The word bounced around my skull. I had read about it. It was a drug used to treat motion sickness, but in high doses, it caused hallucinations, confusion, and obedience. It was known as the devil's breath. "Good," Sarah replied. Her voice was clinical cold, devoid of any of the warmth she showed when we went for brunch. "We need to accelerate the timeline, Jason. The market is crashing and your margin calls are coming due next week. If we do not get access to her trust fund by the end of the month, you are going to lose the firm." I listened, paralyzed as the pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. The headaches, the brain fog, the way I would lose hours of time and wake up confused. It was not grief, it was not stress, it was them. "She is getting hard to manage, though," Jason complained. The sound of liquid being poured into a glass echoed from the phone. "Yesterday she almost found the bank statements I hid in the study. I had to convince her she hallucinated the whole thing. I told her she was sleepwalking again. God, she is so pathetic, Sarah." She looked at me with those big, teary doe eyes and apologized for being crazy. It took everything I had not to laugh in her face. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white. The room began to spin. A wave of nausea rolled over me, hot and acidic. "Stick to the plan," Sarah snapped. "We need a public incident. The charity gala on Saturday is the perfect stage. Everyone who matters will be there. The board, the press, the judge." I know, Jason said. "I will up the dosage on Friday night. By the time we get to the red carpet, she will be seeing monsters in the shadows. She will make a scene. She will scream, maybe attack someone. It will be undeniable proof that Elena Vance has lost her mind." And then Sarah's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper that made my skin crawl. And then Dr. Evans will have no choice but to sign the 5150 hold. We will file for emergency conservatorship Monday morning. Once you are her legal guardian, you can liquidate the assets to cover your debt. The $50 million in her trust becomes ours to manage. And Elena? Well, Elena can spend the rest of her days sedated in that private facility upstate, the one with the very high walls. Cheers to that, Jason said. The recording ended with the clink of glasses and the sound of them kissing. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the vanity. I did not pick it up. I could not move. The silence of the bathroom rushed back in, but now it was screaming. $50 million. That was the price of my life. That was the price of my sanity. A violent heave convulsed my body. I barely made it to the toilet before I emptied my stomach. I retched until my throat burned and my eyes watered, purging the tea, the dinner, and the illusion of my happy marriage. I vomited until there was nothing left but bile and bitterness. I slumped against the cold porcelain of the bathtub, gasping for air. Tears threatened to spill, but I forced them back. No, I would not cry. Crying was for the weak woman they thought I was. Crying was for the Elena who believed in love and loyalty. That Elena died the moment she heard Jason call her pathetic. I dragged myself up and turned on the faucet. I splashed ice-cold water onto my face, scrubbing at my skin as if I could wash away the ghost of his touch. I looked up at the mirror. The woman staring back at me was pale, her hair disheveled, her lips trembling. But her eyes were different. The fog that had clouded my mind for months seemed to lift, burned away by the sheer heat of my rage. I was not crazy. I was being poisoned. I was not losing my mind. I was being murdered slowly, methodically by the two people I trusted most in the world. They wanted to paint me as unstable. They wanted a show at the gala. They wanted to lock me away and strip me of my family's legacy so they could pay off his gambling debts and live in luxury on my dime. I looked at the burner phone lying on the counter. It was no longer just a piece of plastic. It was a weapon. Jason was sleeping in the next room, dreaming of his millions. He thought he was the predator. He thought I was the wounded gazelle limping toward the slaughterhouse. He had no idea that the gazelle had just woken up. I picked up the phone and tucked it deep inside a hidden panel under the sink where I kept my emergency cash. Then I stood up straight. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. "You want a monster?" "Jason," I whispered to the empty room, my voice steady and low, "I will give you a monster, but it won't be the one you drafted in your little script." I unlocked the door and stepped back into the darkness of the bedroom. I climbed back into bed next to the man who planned to destroy me. I pulled the covers up to my chin and lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, listening to him breathe. Let the game begin. The morning sun sliced through the heavy velvet curtains, hitting my face like a physical blow. I had not slept. Not really. I had spent the entire night lying rigid on the edge of the bed, listening to the rhythm of Jason breathing. Every inhale, every exhale sounded like a countdown. I had waited for the dawn with a mixture of desperate anticipation and paralyzing dread. I knew what was coming. I knew the ritual, and I knew that today, for the first time, I had to perform the greatest acting role of my life. The bedroom door creaked open. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing my body to go limp, arranging my limbs into a posture of exhaustion. I heard the soft tread of his slippers on the carpet, followed by the clinking of china. The smell hit me before he even spoke. It was that sickly sweet almond-tinged aroma masked by strong peppermint. For months I had associated that smell with care, with love, with a husband trying to soothe his frantic wife. Now it smelled like a funeral home. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty." Jason's voice was cheerful, terrifyingly normal. I felt the mattress dip as he sat down beside me. I let out a low, groggy moan and fluttered my eyelashes open, making sure to keep my gaze unfocused. I had to look broken. I had to look like the woman he described on the tape, pathetic and confused. "Jason," I whispered, my voice raspy. "What time is it, my head? It feels like it is splitting open." He smiled, reaching out to brush a stray hair from my forehead. His touch made my skin crawl, but I leaned into it, closing my eyes as if seeking comfort. "It is 9 o'clock, darling," he cooed. "You had a rough night. You were talking in your sleep again, screaming about snakes in the walls. It was quite frightening. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Snakes in the walls. He was planting false memories, rewriting my reality, even before I had taken a sip of his poison. If I had not heard that recording, I would have believed him. I would have spent the rest of the day wondering if I really had screamed, wondering if my mind was truly fracturing. "I am sorry," I mumbled, pulling the duvet tighter around my chin. "I do not remember." "That is okay," he said, lifting the steaming mug from the nightstand. "That is why I am here. I made your tea. I added a little extra valerian root today. It will help with the headache and the anxiety. You need to be rested for the gala preparations later this week." He held the mug out to me. The steam curled up between us, a toxic mist. I slowly sat up, propping myself against the pillows. My hands were trembling, and for once I did not have to fake it. The sheer proximity of the poison, the casual cruelty in his eyes made my nerves vibrate. "Thank you," I said softly. "You are too good to me, Jason. I do not deserve you." He watched me take the mug. His eyes were locked on my hands, on the liquid. He was waiting. He needed to see me drink it. He needed to know that the chemicals were entering my bloodstream, breaking down my resistance, turning me into the malleable puppet he needed for his grand finale. I lifted the cup to my lips. The heat radiated against my face. I held my breath, tilting the mug just enough for the liquid to touch my lips, but kept my teeth firmly clenched. I made a loud swallowing noise, my throat bobbing while keeping the hot liquid trapped in my mouth. It burned my tongue, bitter and metallic beneath the mint. I lowered the mug, exhaling sharply as if savoring the warmth. "Is it good?" he asked, and I could hear the eagerness in his voice. "It is perfect," I lied. "Just what I needed." Suddenly his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "I have to take this," he said, standing up. "It is the caterers for the gala. They are incompetent. Drink up, Elena. I want that cup empty when I come back. I will go take this in the hall so I do not disturb you." He leaned down, kissed my forehead, a Judas kiss if there ever was one, and walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. As soon as he was out of sight, I moved. I spat the mouthful of tea back into the mug, wiping my mouth frantically with the sleeve of my robe. I scanned the room. I could not pour it down the sink in the bathroom. The plumbing was old and noisy, and he might hear the water running. I could not hide it in a bottle. He might find it. My eyes landed on the large decorative planter in the corner of the room near the window. It held a lush, expensive fiddle-leaf fig tree that I had bought 2 years ago. It was vibrant and green, standing about 4 feet tall. It was my favorite plant. I scrambled out of bed, rushing over to the corner. My heart was pounding in my ears. I poured the amber liquid into the soil, distributing it evenly around the roots so it would not leave a puddle on the surface. I watched the dark earth swallow the poison, drinking it down greedily. For a second, I felt a pang of guilt for the innocent plant, but it was either the tree or me. I rushed back to the bed, placing the empty mug on the nightstand with a deliberately clumsy clatter. When Jason walked back in 2 minutes later, I was lying back against the pillows, eyes closed, breathing deeply. He walked over to the nightstand and picked up the mug. He peered inside, checking the bottom. Empty. "Good girl," he whispered. I suppressed a shudder. "Rest now, Elena," he said, his voice drifting away as he walked toward the door. "I will tell the staff not to disturb you until lunch. You need to let the medicine work." The door clicked shut. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade down the hallway before I opened my eyes. I was alone. But the real test was just beginning. I spent the next 4 hours locked in that room watching the corner. I did not dare to leave. I needed to see it. I needed physical, undeniable proof that I wasn't just paranoid. I needed to see what that tea was doing to my body. At first, nothing happened. The fiddle leaf fig stood tall and proud, its broad, waxy leaves catching the morning light. I paced the room. I checked my emails on my secure laptop, seeing the notifications from the bank about withdrawals I had not authorized. I looked at the photos of us on the wall, the happy couple smiling in Paris, in Rome, in Aspen. Lies. All of it. By noon, the change began. It started with the lower leaves. The vibrant, deep green began to dull, turning a sickly shade of yellow at the edges. I walked over to it, crouching down. The soil still looked damp, but the plant itself seemed to be recoiling. By 2 in the afternoon, the transformation was horrifying. The leaves were no longer standing upright. They were drooping heavy and lifeless, as if the internal structure of the plant had simply collapsed. The yellowing had spread rapidly, consuming the veins. Dark necrotic spots began to appear on the stems, spreading like a plague. I reached out and touched one of the leaves. It felt dry, papery brittle. It crumbled slightly under my fingertip. I stared at it, my hand covering my mouth. This was a hardy, resilient tree. It had survived neglect drafts and changing seasons, and yet 1 cup of Jason's special tea had destroyed it in a matter of hours. I imagined my own insides. I imagined my neurons firing misfires, my liver struggling to process the toxins, my brain slowly shrinking and withering, just like these leaves. The headaches were not stress. The memory loss was not early onset dementia. The clumsiness was not fatigue. I was being hollowed out. I was being murdered from the inside out, cell by cell, sip by sip. A cold, hard fury settled in my stomach, replacing the fear. I looked at the dying tree. It had sacrificed itself to show me the truth. It was a casualty of war, but it had given me the weapon I needed: certainty. I stood up and walked into the bathroom. I locked the door and turned on the bright vanity lights, the ones I usually avoided, because Jason said they highlighted how sick and tired I looked. I looked at the woman in the glass. She looked like a ghost. Her skin was gray, her eyes sunken, her lips pale and cracked. I was wearing the face of a victim. I was wearing the face Jason had crafted for me. I reached for a washcloth and ran it under hot water. I scrubbed my face. I scrubbed away the layer of pale foundation I had started wearing, because Jason told me my natural skin looked blotchy. I scrubbed away the concealer I used to hide the dark circles that were actually caused by dehydration from his medicine. I looked closer. Beneath the exhaustion, beneath the trauma, I saw something else. I saw the jawline of a woman who had built a business empire from scratch before she was 30. I saw the eyes of a woman who had negotiated with sharks and won. "I am not crazy," I said to the mirror. My voice was low, but it did not shake. I remembered the times I had apologized to him for things I hadn't done. I remembered thanking him for the tea. I remembered looking at him with adoration while he looked at me with calculation. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I wiped it away angrily. This was not the time for grief. Grief was a luxury for the living, and I was fighting for my life. I opened my makeup drawer. I pushed aside the muted beige tones Jason preferred. I reached for the red lipstick I hadn't worn since our wedding day, the one he said was too aggressive. I didn't put it on yet. Not yet. I had to play the role a little longer. But holding the cold metal tube in my hand felt like holding a bullet. I looked back at the bedroom, at the withered plant in the corner. It was a warning and a promise. "He wants me to be unstable," I whispered. "He wants a breakdown." I tossed the washcloth into the hamper. I will give him a breakdown, but it won't be mine. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out. The headache was gone. The fog had lifted. I was hungry. I was focused. And for the first time in months, I knew exactly who I was. I am Elena Vance, and I am done drinking the tea. The dress Jason chose for me was a pale, washed-out beige chiffon. It hung loosely on my frame, making me look frail, ghostly, and entirely harmless. It was the color of surrender. As I stood in front of the full-length mirror in our dressing room, I applied my makeup with the precision of a stage actor preparing for a final curtain call. I skipped the blush. I left the dark circles under my eyes exposed, dabbing just a hint of gray shadow to accentuate the hollows of my cheeks. I wanted to look like a woman who was fading, a woman who was slowly becoming transparent. Jason walked in, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at me in the reflection, and for a brief second, a flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. He did not tell me I looked beautiful. He did not tell me I looked elegant. He simply nodded as if inspecting a prop that had been placed correctly on a set. "Perfect," he said, his voice smooth. "You look rested." I turned to him, forcing a small, trembling smile. I am nervous, Jason. Do we really have to go? I feel so foggy today. The shadows, they keep moving. I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. He loved this. He loved that I was feeding him the very lines he had planted in my head. We have to. Elena, he said, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. It is the Sterlings. They are the biggest investors in the firm. If we do not show up, they might pull their funding. You do not want to be the reason I lose everything. Do you? The Guilt Trip, a classic hit from his greatest hits album. No, I whispered, looking down at my shoes. Of course not. Good. Just try to keep it together. Do not drink too much. And for God's sake, if you feel an episode coming on, just squeeze my hand and I will handle it. He sounded so supportive, so patient. To anyone else, he was the doting husband caring for his fragile wife. But I knew the truth. He wanted an episode. He needed an audience to witness my decline before the gala. The Sterlings were not just investors. They were gossips. Whatever happened tonight would be whispered all over the country club by tomorrow morning. We arrived at Le Jardin, the most exclusive French restaurant in East Hampton. The maitre d' greeted us by name, his eyes lingering on me with a mixture of curiosity and pity. I kept my head down, clutching Jason's arm as if I might blow away in the wind. The Sterlings were already seated at a private corner table. Robert Sterling was a portly man with a red face and a loud laugh, while his wife Cynthia was a sharp-eyed woman who wore her diamonds like armor. They stood up as we approached. Elena, my dear, Cynthia said, leaning in to air-kiss my cheek. It has been ages. You look thin. I have been under the weather, I murmured, letting my voice trail off. We sat down. The tablecloth was crisp white linen, the silverware gleaming under the crystal chandelier. It was a setting for civilized people, for power brokers. It was the perfect stage for a disaster. Jason ordered for me the filet mignon medium rare, a glass of red wine. He knew I hated red wine. It gave me migraines. But he ordered it anyway, probably hoping the tannins would interact with the imaginary drugs in my system and make me even more unstable. So Jason Robert boomed, taking a sip of his scotch. I hear big things are happening with the fund. You are expanding into biotech. Jason launched into his pitch, charming and confident. He spoke of growth, a vision of the future. I sat there picking at the bread roll, letting my eyes drift around the room. I needed to time this perfectly. I couldn't just start screaming immediately. That would be too obvious. I had to let the tension build. I had to make them uncomfortable first. I started tapping my fork against the side of my plate, softly at first. Tink, tink, tink. Cynthia glanced at me, then back at Jason. Jason ignored it, but I saw his jaw tighten. Tink, tink, tink. The rhythm was erratic, annoying. I stared fixedly at the floral centerpiece, widening my eyes slightly. Elena, Jason said, pausing his monologue. Darling, are you all right? I didn't answer him. I leaned forward, staring at the flowers, as if I saw something crawling inside them. They are back, I whispered. My voice was low, but in the hush of the restaurant it carried. Who is back, dear? Cynthia asked, her voice laced with nervous tension. The spiders, I said, pointing a trembling finger at a perfect white rose. Can't you see them? They are spinning. They are spinning webs over the money. Robert stopped chewing his steak. The table fell into a deadly silence. Jason reached out and covered my hand with his. His grip was tight, painful. Elena. There are no spiders, he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. You are having an episode. Remember what Dr. Evans said? It is just the stress. No. I pulled my hand away violently. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the wooden floor. Heads at nearby tables turned. This was it. The spotlight was on me. They are everywhere. I cried out, my voice rising to a frantic pitch. I looked at Robert. They are crawling on your tie. Get them off! I grabbed my glass of red wine, the one Jason had ordered, and hurled it. I didn't throw it at Robert. I threw it at the center of the table. The glass shattered with a spectacular crash. Red wine exploded outward, drenching the white tablecloth, staining the flowers, and splashing onto Jason's pristine white dress shirt. It looked like a crime scene. It looked like blood. "Oh my God," Cynthia gasped, clutching her pearls. I backed away from the table, my hands clutching my hair, hyperventilating. "Get them off me! They are under my skin. I can feel them." Jason stood up. He didn't look angry. He looked devastated. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. He walked around the table, ignoring the wine dripping from his shirt, and approached me with his hands raised in a placating gesture. "It is okay, Elena," he said soothingly, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "I am here. I have got you. It is not real. None of it is real." He wrapped his arms around me. I thrashed against him for a moment, playing the part of the hysterical woman fighting her savior, and then I let myself go limp. I collapsed into his chest, sobbing loudly. "I am sorry," I wailed, burying my face in his wine-stained shirt. "I am so sorry, Jason. I am broken. I am crazy." I felt his hand stroke my hair. I felt his chest rumble as he spoke to the Sterlings. "I am so sorry, Robert Cynthia. Please forgive us. We have been struggling with her mental health for months now. I thought she was ready for an evening out, but clearly I was wrong." "Poor thing," I heard Cynthia whisper. "She has completely lost it. You are a saint, Jason. I do not know how you manage." "I will take her home," Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. "Please put the dinner on my tab. We will reschedule when she is in a facility that can help her." A facility. He had said the quiet part out loud. He was planting the seed. He guided me out of the restaurant, his arm firmly around my waist, supporting my weak body. I kept my head buried in his shoulder, hiding my face from the prying eyes of the other diners. I could feel their judgment. I could feel their pity. To them, I was the tragic, insane wife of a powerful man. We stepped out into the cool night air. The valet brought the car around. Jason opened the door for me and helped me in, treating me like I was made of glass. As he walked around to the driver's side, his demeanor changed instantly. The concern vanished. He got in, slammed the door, and started the engine. He didn't look at me. He just stared straight ahead, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips. "Well," he said, pulling out of the parking lot, "that was dramatic, but effective." I huddled against the passenger door, shivering. "I am sorry, Jason," I whispered. "I didn't mean to." "Save it," he snapped. "You did exactly what I needed you to do. Robert just texted me. He said not to worry about the funding. He said I need to focus on getting you the help you need." He laughed. A cold, dark sound. "We are going to have you committed on Monday, Elena, after the gala. It is for your own good. You are clearly dangerous to yourself and others. Did you see the way you looked at them? You are gone, babe." He reached over and patted my knee, a gesture of ownership. "Don't worry. Sarah and I will take good care of the money." I turned my head to look out the window, watching the dark trees blur past. I let out a long, shaky breath, making it sound like a sob. But in the reflection of the glass where he couldn't see, I wasn't crying. I was smiling. He thought I was broken. He thought the wine glass was an accident of insanity. He didn't realize that by shattering that glass, I had shattered his timeline. I hadn't just acted crazy, I had forced him to accelerate his plan. He was so confident now, so sure of his victory that he would get sloppy. He would stop looking over his shoulder. He thought he was the puppet master pulling my strings. He didn't realize that I had just cut them. Let him think he won tonight. Let him gloat. Because the higher he climbed on his pedestal of lies, the harder he would fall when I kicked it out from under him. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the seat. Monday, I thought. Bring it on. The next morning, Jason left for the office with a spring in his step. He whistled a tune as he adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, the image of a man without a care in the world. He stopped to kiss my cheek, telling me to rest, and that he had instructed the staff to leave me alone until dinner. He was so confident in his control over me, so sure that his drugged wife would spend the day staring at the wall in a stupor, that he didn't even bother to lock the front door. As soon as his Porsche pulled out of the driveway, the fog of the dutiful invalid wife vanished. I did not go back to bed. I went to the walk-in closet in the guest room, the one place Jason never looked. Inside an old winter boot, buried deep in the toe, was a roll of cash. $10,000. I had started stashing it away months ago, not because I suspected murder, but because my mother had always taught me that a woman should have money that her husband did not know about. It was my freedom fund, and today it was my war chest. I dressed quickly in clothes I hadn't worn in years. A pair of worn jeans, a gray hoodie, and oversized sunglasses. I looked like a suburban mom running errands, not the heiress to the Vance fortune. I slipped out the servants' entrance, bypassing the security cameras I knew Jason monitored from his phone. I walked a mile to the nearest bus stop, my heart racing with every passing car, terrified one of them would be him. I took a bus to a diner on the outskirts of town, a place with cracked vinyl seats and the smell of stale coffee. It was the kind of place Jason would rather die than be seen in. That made it perfect. Maria was waiting for me in the back booth. When I saw her, my composure almost cracked. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she was wringing her hands nervously on the table. She had spent the night in a holding cell before her son posted the bail money I had anonymously wired to him that morning. Maria the First whispered, sliding into the booth opposite her. She looked up, and her face crumbled. "Miss Elena, oh my God, you should not be here. If he sees you..." "He won't," I said, reaching across the table to take her rough, warm hands. "I needed to see you. I needed to thank you." She shook her head, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I did not steal that watch, Miss Elena. I swear on my grandchildren." He put it in my bag. I saw him do it, but by the time I realized what was happening, the police were already there. "I know, Maria. I know you didn't take it." And I listened to the recording. Her grip on my hands tightened. "Then you know what they are doing to you. You have to leave, Miss Elena. You have to run, go to the police, show them the phone." I shook my head slowly. "Not yet. The police won't believe a recording from a stolen phone given to a mental patient by a woman accused of theft. Jason is charming, Maria. He is respected. He has lawyers who play golf with the district attorney. If I go now, he will spin it. He will say I am paranoid that I made it up. I need more. I need undeniable proof." I pulled an envelope from my hoodie pocket and slid it across the table. Inside was $5,000 cash. "Take this," I said. "Go to your sister in Jersey. Stay there until I call you. Do not answer your phone. Do not talk to anyone." She looked at the money, then at me. "I cannot take this. It is back pay," I said firmly, "plus a bonus for saving my life. Go, Maria. Please, knowing you are safe is the only thing that will let me focus on what I have to do." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Be careful, little bird. That man, he has the devil inside him." After Maria left, I made a call on a prepaid phone I had bought at a convenience store. The number belonged to a man named Cole. He wasn't a high-end corporate investigator. He was a guy who used to be a cop until he punched a corrupt sergeant. He worked out of a basement in Queens and dealt in cash and silence. I had found his name in my father's old contacts listed under break in case of emergency. I met him an hour later in a parking lot near the highway. Cole was a mountain of a man with a scarred lip and eyes that had seen everything. He didn't ask why a woman in a hoodie was handing him a stack of bills. He just counted it. "I need a full financial forensic sweep on Jason Miller," I said, my voice steady. "Every bank account, every credit card, every shell company. And I need dirt on Sarah Jenkins. Who she sleeps with, what she owes, everything." Cole nodded, tucking the cash into his jacket. "What is the timeline yesterday?" I said. "And one more thing," I added, pulling a small Ziploc bag from my pocket. Inside was a lock of my hair I had cut off in the diner bathroom. "Take this to an independent lab, a tox screen. I need to know exactly what is in my system, and I need the results on paper signed and notarized." He took the bag, looking at it for a second before meeting my eyes. His expression softened just a fraction. "Husband trouble." "You could say that." "I will have the preliminaries by tonight," Cole said. "Watch your back, lady. If he is poisoning you, he is desperate. And desperate men are sloppy, but they are also dangerous." I returned to the house before noon, sneaking back in the way I came. The silence of the empty mansion felt heavy, oppressive. I changed back into my silk robe, washed the city grit off my face, and prepared for the most terrifying part of my day, the infiltration. Jason's home office was his sanctuary. It was always locked, and he had the only key. Or so he thought. He didn't know that 2 years ago when he lost his keys on a ski trip, I had made a copy of the master set. I had never used it. I respected his privacy. I trusted him. I stood before the heavy mahogany door, the keys sweating in my palm. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. If he came home early, if he had installed cameras inside the office. I took a deep breath. I am Elena Vance, I told myself. This is my house. I turned the key. The lock clicked a sound loud as a gunshot in the quiet hallway. I pushed the door open and slipped inside, locking it behind me. The room smelled of leather and expensive scotch. It was orderly, impressive, the command center of a successful venture capitalist. But I knew now it was all a facade. I moved quickly. I had bought 3 tiny motion-activated spy cameras from a spy shop in the city. They were the size of a button. I placed one on the bookshelf nestled between 2 law books facing his desk. I placed another on top of the curtain rod, giving a wide view of the room. The third I stuck under the desk itself, pointed at where his legs would be. Then I turned my attention to the desk. It was immaculate. Jason was careful. He didn't leave incriminating papers lying around. I tried the drawers. Locked. I used the small file cabinet key on the ring. It worked. I started flipping through the files. Tax returns, client lists, boring legitimate paperwork. He was covering his tracks well. I felt a surge of panic. Maybe there was nothing here. Maybe he kept it all digital encrypted on the server I couldn't access. My hand brushed against the bottom of the drawer. It felt uneven. I crouched down, feeling along the wood. There was a false bottom. Of course there was. It was so cliché it was almost laughable, but Jason was a man who lived his life like a movie character. I pried the thin wood panel up with a letter opener. Underneath lay a thick manila folder. No label. I opened it. The first document was a mortgage deed. My eyes scanned the lines and my breath hitched. It was a second mortgage on our house. The house my parents left me. The house that was fully paid off. The loan was for $5 million. I looked at the signature line. Elena Vance. The signature was a perfect replica of my own. I traced the ink with my finger. It was forged. He had leveraged my home, my sanctuary, for $5 million in cash. But where did the money go? I turned the page. It was a printout of a digital wallet transaction history. The header read, Project Omni, Decentralized Currency Exchange. I didn't know much about crypto, but I knew red ink when I saw it. The columns were a bloodbath. Withdrawal, loss, margin call, liquidation. Jason hadn't just invested the $5 million. He had leveraged it. He had bet against the market on a volatile new coin, convinced he was smarter than the algorithm. I did the math in my head, my fingers trembling as I held the paper. $5 million from the house, $2 million from our joint savings, another $3 million in personal loans from shadowy LLCs I didn't recognize. Total loss. $12 million. He wasn't just in debt. He was obliterated. He was underwater by an amount that would send him to federal prison for fraud if anyone found out. I flipped to the next page. It was a menacing letter from a company called Titan Holdings. Mr. Miller, your grace period has expired. We require full repayment of the principal plus interest by the 30th. Failure to comply will result in immediate asset seizure and other less formal methods of collection. The 30th. That was 3 days from now. The day after the charity gala, the puzzle pieces slammed together with terrifying clarity. He didn't just want my $50 million trust fund because he was greedy. He needed it because he was terrified. He was being hunted. He needed access to my liquid assets immediately to pay off the loan sharks and cover the mortgage fraud before the bank foreclosed. If he didn't get conservatorship over me by Monday, he was a dead man walking. He wasn't killing me out of malice. He was killing me out of survival. I was just collateral damage in his catastrophic gambling addiction. I took photos of every single document with the burner phone, the forgery, the crypto losses, the threat letter. I was about to put the folder back when I heard it, the sound of the front door opening downstairs. "Elena, I'm home." Jason's voice echoed up the stairs. He was early, hours early, panic, cold and sharp, seized my chest. I shoved the papers back into the hidden compartment. I fumbled with the false bottom, pressing it down. It wouldn't click into place. "Elena, are you upstairs?" His footsteps were heavy on the stairs. He was coming up. I slammed the drawer shut and locked it. I looked around. The room looked untouched. I ran to the door, unlocking it as quietly as I could. I stepped out into the hallway just as Jason reached the top of the landing. He stopped staring at me. His eyes darted to the door of his office behind me, then back to my face. "What were you doing in there?" he asked, his voice losing its cheerful facade. It was low suspicious. My mind raced. I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't let him know I knew. I let my shoulders slump. I let my eyes go wide and vacant. I raised a trembling hand to my forehead. I don't know," I whispered, swaying slightly on my feet. I heard a phone ringing. I thought it was my father calling. Jason blinked. "Your father, Elena. Your father has been dead for 3 years." I looked at him, letting a tear slip down my cheek. "He has... but..." I heard him. He was in the room. He said he wanted to talk about the gallery. I grabbed Jason's arm, digging my fingers in. "Is he in there, Jason? Did you hide him?" Jason's tension melted away, replaced by that familiar condescending smirk. He believed me. He believed his poison was working so well that I was hallucinating dead relatives. He let out a sigh, putting his hands on my shoulders. "Oh, honey, you're getting worse. There is no one in there. It is just the stress." He pulled me into a hug. Over his shoulder, I looked at the closed office door. "You are right," I mumbled into his jacket. "I am so confused. I just want to sleep." "That is a good idea," he said, patting my back. "Go lie down. I will bring you your tea." "Yes," I said, pulling away and walking toward the bedroom. "I would like that." I walked away from him, my legs feeling like lead. I had the evidence. I had the motive. I had the proof that he was a criminal and a fraud. But as I lay down on the bed, waiting for him to bring the poisoned cup, I realized the most dangerous part wasn't over. He was desperate. He owed money to people who broke legs for a living. And now he had a deadline. The gala was in 48 hours. He was going to up the dosage. He was going to try to break my mind completely. I closed my eyes and clenched my fists under the covers. Let him try. He was playing checkers. I was playing chess. And I had just captured his king. The Saturday of the summer charity gala arrived with a sky the color of a bruise, heavy with humidity, and the threat of a storm that never quite broke. Inside our estate, the atmosphere was even more suffocating. Jason was vibrating with a nervous, manic energy that he tried to disguise as concern. He had been on the phone since dawn, pacing the length of the downstairs hallway, his voice a low, urgent murmur. I stayed in bed, feigning the lethargy that the scopolamine was supposed to induce, but I strained my ears to catch fragments of his conversation. I heard the name Sarah repeatedly. I heard the words Judge Myers and Monday morning docket. And then I heard the sentence that made my blood run cold and hot all at once. "We need the visuals, Sarah. The board is wavering. If she looks like a disaster tonight, the emergency motion goes through without a hitch." He was scripting my destruction. He treated the legal theft of my life not as a crime, but as a production schedule. The gala was his stage, and I was the prop that needed to be positioned just right to catch the light of public pity. By 4 in the afternoon, the house was buzzing with activity, but none of it was for me. Usually for an event of this magnitude, I would have a team, a stylist, a makeup artist, a hair technician. We would drink champagne and laugh while they transformed me into the queen of the Hampton social scene. Today, there was no team. Jason had fired them all yesterday, claiming that I was too fragile for the noise and the fuss. He came into the bedroom carrying a garment bag, his face set in a mask of grim determination. I was sitting at the vanity staring at my reflection. I had deliberately not washed my hair for 2 days. It hung limp and oily around my face. I had not applied any skincare. My face was pale, stripped bare, a blank canvas, waiting for him to paint his masterpiece of misery. "Time to get ready, Elena," he said, not meeting my eyes. I stood up slowly, clutching the edge of the dressing table for support. I pretended to sway. "I need a shower, Jason. I whispered, my voice trembling. "I smell like sickness. And my hair. I need to call Antoine." "No," Jason snapped sharper than he intended. He cleared his throat, softening his tone. "No, darling, Antoine is too loud. You know how sensitive you are to noise right now. We do not want to trigger another migraine, do we? Remember the restaurant? We cannot have a repeat of that." He walked over to the closet. I watched him. My beautiful gowns were hanging there. The emerald silk I bought in Milan. The gold sequined halston that made me look like a statue come to life. And in the very back, hidden inside a garment bag from a dry cleaner I never used, was the dress I had bought myself 3 days ago. The red dress. The armor I planned to wear for my resurrection. But Jason did not reach for the silk or the sequins. He pushed past the designer labels, his hand searching for something specific. He stopped at the far end of the rack where I kept the clothes I used for gardening or painting. He pulled out a dress I hadn't looked at in years. It was a vintage linen dress, a shapeless, drab thing in a color that could only be described as dead moss. It was 2 sizes too big for me now, having been bought when I was pregnant before the miscarriage. It was wrinkled heavy and utterly devoid of life. It was a dress for a ghost. "Wear this," he said, tossing it onto the bed. I looked at the dress, then at him. I let my mouth hang open slightly, feigning confusion. "That old thing? But Jason, it is the summer gala. The theme is Midnight in Paris. Everyone will be in couture. I cannot wear that. You will look comfortable." He interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Elena, look at yourself. You are sick. You cannot squeeze into a corset. You cannot wear heels. This dress is loose. It breathes. It is what is best for you." He walked over to me, gripping my shoulders. His fingers dug into my flesh, a subtle warning disguised as a caress. "Do you want to stay home?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "Because if you refuse to wear this, I will have to leave you here alone. And you know what happens when you are alone. The shadows come back. The voices start. Is that what you want?" I shuddered, shrinking away from him. "No," I whimpered. "Please do not leave me alone." "Jason, I am scared of the house." "Then put on the dress," he commanded. I obeyed. I stripped off my robe, standing before him in my underwear, vulnerable and exposed. I saw him look at my body, but there was no desire in his eyes, only calculation. He was checking for bruises, making sure there were no physical marks that could contradict the narrative of a loving husband caring for a mentally ill wife. I pulled the linen dress over my head. It smelled of dust and cedar. It fell around me like a shroud, swallowing my figure, hiding my waist, making me look small and lost inside its folds. I looked in the mirror. I looked 10 years older. I looked defeated. Jason stood behind me, nodding in approval. "Perfect," he murmured. He reached for a hairbrush. "I will do your hair." I sat down. I expected him to brush it out, maybe put it in a simple bun. Instead, he ran the brush through it, roughly pulling at the tangles until my eyes watered. Then he used his fingers to mess it up, pulling strands loose, creating a chaotic, frizzy halo around my face. He took a bottle of hair oil and rubbed too much of it into the roots, making it look greasy and unkempt. "There," he said. "Now you look natural. You look like you just woke up. It shows." Vulnerability. He picked up a lipstick. It was a pale nude shade that washed me out completely. He applied it to my lips, but he went slightly over the line on the bottom lip. Just a fraction. Just enough to make me look like I couldn't hold my hand steady. I sat there frozen, letting him vandalize my face. Every smudge, every tangle, every layer of ugliness he added was another nail in his own coffin. He thought he was destroying my image. He didn't realize he was building my defense case. The worse I looked, the more shocking the transformation would be when I took the stand. He stepped back, admiring his handiwork. "You are ready." I stood up, staring at the stranger in the mirror. The woman looking back was a tragedy, a cautionary tale. She was exactly who Jason needed her to be to secure his $5 million loan. I turned to him. I lowered my head, clasping my hands in front of me in a gesture of total submission. I summoned every ounce of fear and devotion I had once felt for him, channeling it into my voice. "I will do whatever you want, Jason," I said softly. "I just want to be a good wife. I just want the noise in my head to stop." He smiled a genuine, terrifying smile of victory. He kissed my forehead right over the greasy roots of my hair. "You are a good wife, Elena, and after tonight the noise will stop forever, I promise." We walked downstairs. The driver was waiting. As we stepped out of the front door, the humidity hit me, making the heavy linen dress cling to my skin. I felt suffocated, but my mind was crystal clear. In the car, Jason briefed me on the plan. "We will go in through the side entrance, but we have to cross the red carpet area to get to our table. The photographers will be there. I want you to hold my arm. Look down. If anyone asks you a question, do not answer. Just squeeze my arm and I will talk for you. Do you understand?" "Yes, Jason," I said. "And if you start to feel weird, just let it happen," he added, checking his watch. "The tea I gave you earlier should be kicking in right about now. Do not fight it. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream, scream. I will be right there to catch you." I looked out the window as the limousine sped toward the country club. I touched the pocket of the linen dress. It was deep and loose. Inside, hidden in the folds, was the burner phone. And taped to my thigh under the ugly dress was the flash drive containing the forensic accounting report Cole had emailed me an hour ago. Jason thought he was bringing a lamb to the slaughter. He thought he was bringing a broken woman to her final public humiliation before he locked her away. He had no idea. He wasn't bringing a victim to the gala. He was bringing the executioner. I looked at him one last time as the lights of the country club came into view. He was adjusting his tie, checking his teeth in the rearview mirror. He looked perfect. He looked like the golden boy of finance. "Enjoy the spotlight, Jason," I thought, "because it is the last time you will ever see it." The car slowed down. I saw the flashbulbs popping in the distance, a sea of white light waiting to devour us. "I will do whatever you want, Jason," I repeated in my head, a mantra of war. "You want a show. You want the world to see Elena Vance Fine. Let's give them a show they will never forget." The side entrance of the Hamptons Country Club smelled of damp earth and old money. It was the service entrance usually reserved for caterers and musicians, but tonight it was the entry point for Jason Miller's shameful secret. He guided me through the narrow hallway, his grip on my arm tight enough to leave bruises, treating me like a volatile explosive that needed to be handled with extreme caution. We stopped outside a small private anteroom just off the main ballroom. The muffled sound of a string quartet and the low hum of hundreds of wealthy voices drifted through the heavy oak doors. "Stay here," Jason commanded, pushing me gently into the room. It was a small waiting area with a velvet sofa and a vanity mirror meant for brides to touch up their makeup. It was claustrophobic. "I will go out there and prepare them," he said, adjusting his tuxedo jacket. "I need to explain your condition to the board members so they are not too shocked when they see you. Just sit down. Do not touch anything. Do not wander off. I will come back for you in 20 minutes for the speech." He looked at me one last time, taking in the frizzy hair, the pale, washed-out face, and the hideous, shapeless linen dress that hung on my frame like a burlap sack. He nodded, satisfied with his creation. "You look appropriate," he said. "Just remember, Elena, squeeze my arm if you get confused." He turned and left, closing the door with a click. I listened to his footsteps fading down the corridor. I waited for a full minute, counting the seconds in my head, letting the silence settle around me. Then I moved. I did not sit down. I did not stare at the wall. I walked over to the door and locked it. Then I walked to the far corner of the room where a large decorative screen stood. Behind it, sitting innocently on a luggage rack, was a garment bag I had had my assistant from the gallery deliver 3 hours ago. Jason had fired my home staff, but he had forgotten that I had an entire team of loyal employees in the city who would jump in front of a train for me. I unzipped the bag. The sound was the only noise in the room, sharp and decisive. Inside was not just a dress, it was a declaration of war. It was a custom Valentino gown, a shade of red so deep and vibrant it looked like fresh arterial blood. It was structured silk strapless, with a neckline that plunged daringly and a slit that ran up the thigh. It was a dress designed for a woman who owned the room, not a woman who hid in the corners. I stripped off the ugly linen dress Jason had forced me into. I let it pool on the floor, stepping out of it with a sense of liberation that made my head spin. I kicked it into the corner. That was the old Elena, the victim, the patient. She was gone. I pulled the red gown on. The silk felt cool and expensive against my skin, a second skin that reminded me of who I really was. It zipped up the back with a satisfying finality, hugging my curves, holding me upright like a suit of armor. I sat at the vanity. I opened the makeup kit I had stashed in the bag. I worked quickly, my hands steady and precise. I pulled my hair back, smoothing the frizz Jason had created with a high-end serum, twisting it into a severe, elegant chignon that exposed the sharp line of my jaw and neck. I covered the pale nude lipstick with a matte crimson that matched the dress. I defined my eyes with sharp winged liner, turning the exhausted hollow look into a piercing, dangerous gaze. I put on the diamond drop earrings my mother had left me, the ones Jason had tried to make me sell last year to cover his investments. I had hidden them in a safety deposit box he didn't know about. They caught the light glittering like shards of ice. I stood up and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was terrifying. She was beautiful, yes, but it was a cold, predatory beauty. There was no trace of the fragile, confused wife. There was only the heiress. The CEO, the woman who controlled $50 million. I checked the time. 15 minutes had passed. Jason would be in the middle of his performance right now. I unlocked the door. I slipped on the pair of 4-inch stiletto heels, not the sensible flats he had given me. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The walk to the ballroom felt like walking toward a throne. The hallway was empty, but as I approached the double doors of the main entrance, 2 security guards looked up. Their jaws dropped. They recognized me, but they clearly hadn't expected to see me looking like this. One of them moved to open the door for me, his eyes wide. "Thank you," I said, my voice low and commanding. He pulled the heavy door open. The ballroom was a sea of black tuxedos and pastel gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume lilies and champagne. The noise was a dull roar of conversation, laughter, and the clinking of crystal. I stepped onto the landing at the top of the short staircase that led down to the dance floor. At first no one noticed, but then a woman near the front turned. She nudged her husband. He looked up. Then the couple next to them turned. A ripple of silence spread through the room, moving outward from the staircase like a shockwave. It wasn't the polite silence of respect. It was the stunned, breathless silence of shock. The string quartet, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, trailed off and stopped playing. Within 30 seconds, the entire room had fallen quiet. 500 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. I did not look down. I did not shrink. I stood tall, one hand resting lightly on the banister, the red dress blazing against the muted colors of the crowd. I scanned the room, searching for him. I found him near the center of the room, holding court with Sarah and the Sterlings. He was holding a glass of scotch, his back to me, deep in conversation. He was so absorbed in his lie that he hadn't noticed the silence yet. I began to descend the stairs. The click of my heels on the marble steps echoed in the quiet hall. Click, click, click. The crowd parted for me. People stepped back, creating a wide path straight to where my husband stood. They looked at me with awe, with confusion, but not a single person looked at me with pity. As I reached the floor, Sarah looked up. Her eyes went wide, her mouth dropping open in a most undignified manner. She tapped Jason's shoulder frantically. Jason turned around, a look of annoyance on his face at being interrupted. He froze. The glass of scotch in his hand tilted dangerously. His face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray that clashed horribly with his expensive tan. He blinked once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. He looked at the red dress. He looked at my hair. He looked at my eyes. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. A very angry, very alive ghost. I didn't stop. I walked straight up to him, the crowd watching every step. I stopped inches from him, close enough to smell the fear radiating off him. "Hello, darling," I said. My voice was clear, steady, and loud enough to be heard by the 20 people standing closest to us. Jason's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He couldn't speak. His brain was short-circuiting. This wasn't in the script. The script said I was supposed to be cowering in the anteroom in a burlap sack, drooling on myself. "Elena," he finally choked out. It was a strangled whisper. I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I hope I'm not late," I said. I decided the linen dress wasn't quite festive enough for the occasion. You know how I love a theme. Sarah recovered first, though her voice was shrill. Elena, we didn't expect you to come out yet. Jason was just telling us about your health. Oh, I know, I said, turning my gaze to Sarah. She flinched under the weight of it. Jason is always so concerned. I reached out and plucked a glass of champagne from the tray of a passing waiter who had stopped to stare. I held the flute by the stem. My hand was rock steady. The golden liquid didn't even ripple. I took a sip, looking Jason dead in the eye. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me like he always did at home. But here in the light, he just looked desperate. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, his voice a low, venomous growl that only I could hear. "You are supposed to be sick. You are supposed to be in the room." "I am feeling much better, Jason," I replied, keeping my tone conversational. He grabbed my elbow, his fingers digging in. His eyes darted around the room, seeing the investors watching us. He forced a tight, pained smile for their benefit, while his words were pure poison. "You are having an episode," he whispered through his teeth. "You are manic. I can see it in your eyes. You forgot to take your medication, didn't you? That is why you are acting like this. You are out of control." I looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked back up at his face. I didn't pull away. I leaned in, bringing my lips close to his ear like a loving wife sharing a secret. "I didn't forget, Jason," I whispered back. He stiffened. "You didn't drink the tea," he breathed, the realization dawning on him with horror. I laughed, a soft, chilling sound. "Oh no, darling, I didn't drink it. But don't worry, it didn't go to waste." I pulled back slightly so I could see the panic flooding his eyes. I wanted to remember this moment forever. I gave it to the fiddle leaf fig in the bedroom, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal calm. "And you know what, I think the plant enjoyed it more than I would have, although it is looking a little withered this evening. Dead, actually." Jason's knees buckled slightly. He gripped my arm harder to steady himself. You know?" he stammered. I took another sip of champagne, savoring the dryness of the vintage. "I know everything, Jason. I know about Sarah. I know about the conservatorship. I know about the $50 million, and I know you are broke." I saw the Sterlings stepping closer, sensing the tension, but unable to hear the words. They looked concerned, but not for me. They were looking at Jason, who was currently sweating profusely and looking like he was about to vomit. Jason tried to salvage it. He tried to pivot back to the script. "She is hallucinating," he said loudly, addressing the group, though his voice cracked. She thinks she is someone else. It is the delusions. I need to get her to a doctor immediately." He tried to pull me toward the exit. I planted my feet. I didn't move an inch. "Actually," I said, raising my voice so it carried over the music, "I think we should stay. I have a speech prepared too, Jason, and I think the investors would be very interested to hear it." I turned to Robert Sterling, flashing him a dazzling, sane smile. "Robert, have you ever heard of a burner phone? It is a fascinating piece of technology. Amazing what you can find on them." Jason lunged for me. "Stop her," he screamed, losing all composure. "She is dangerous." But he was too late. I sidestepped him easily, my red dress swirling around me like a matador's cape. He stumbled, catching himself on a waiter, sending a tray of glasses crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass silenced the few people who were still whispering. I stood alone in the center of the circle, untouched, unbothered, and magnificent. "No, Jason," I said, looking down at him as he scrambled to regain his balance. "I am not dangerous. I am just awake." And then I turned and walked toward the stage. The microphone was waiting. "Get your hands off her." Jason froze. The voice did not come from me. It came from the crowd. It was Robert Sterling. The jovial, red-faced investor had stepped forward, blocking Jason's path. His expression was no longer friendly. It was confused, wary, and tinged with the beginnings of suspicion. Jason blinked, looking from Robert to me, his composure fracturing like a windshield hit by a rock. "Robert, please." Jason stammered, his grip on my arm loosening just enough. "You do not understand. She is having a psychotic break. She gets violent. I am trying to protect you. I am trying to protect everyone." "Violent?" I asked, my voice calm, carrying effortlessly over the hush of the room. I looked down at my arm where Jason's fingers had left red welts against my pale skin. Then I looked up at him. The only person being violent here is you, Jason. I yanked my arm free. He was so stunned by my strength, or perhaps by the sudden shift in the room's energy, that he let me go. I did not run. I did not flee toward the exit as he had hoped. I turned my back on him and walked straight toward the stage. The band had stopped playing entirely. The silence in the ballroom was heavy, thick with tension and unasked questions. The only sound was the rhythmic click of my stilettos on the hardwood floor as I ascended the stairs to the small podium where the microphone waited. An audio technician, a young man with headphones around his neck, looked at me with wide eyes. He started to reach for the microphone to cut the feed, likely following some frantic hand signal from Sarah in the front row. I fixed him with a look. It was the look I used to give to gallery owners who tried to lowball me on a Monet. It was a look that said, "Do not even think about it." "Leave it on," I said softly, "and give me the HDMI cable." The boy hesitated, glancing at Jason, who was now pushing his way through the crowd toward the stage, his face a mask of panic. "Do it," I commanded, "unless you want to explain to the police why you were an accomplice to fraud." The boy paled and handed me the cable. I took the burner phone from the deep pocket of my red dress. It was an archaic thing, but I had an adapter. I had prepared for everything. My hands moved with surgical precision. I plugged the phone in. Jason reached the bottom of the stairs just as the massive LED screen behind me flickered to life. It had been displaying the charity's logo, a pair of helping hands. Now it displayed a date stamp from 3 days ago. "Turn it off!" Jason screamed, his voice cracking. He lunged for the stairs, but 2 security guards, sensing that the tide had turned, stepped in his way. They didn't know who to believe yet, but they knew a man screaming at a calm woman in a red dress was the bigger threat. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone. My voice boomed through the speakers, echoing off the high ceilings. "Thank you for coming tonight. My husband Jason wanted to tell you a story about me. He wanted to tell you that I am sick, that I am unstable, that I need to be locked away for my own protection." I looked down at Jason, who was struggling against the guards, his face purple with rage. "But I think it is time we watched a different story, a true story." I pressed play on the phone. The giant screen behind me illuminated the ballroom with a harsh, grainy light. It was the footage from the hidden camera I had placed in the kitchen. The image was crisp enough. It showed Jason standing at the kitchen island. He looked normal. He looked handsome. He was whistling. The entire room watched, captivated. On the screen, Jason reached into his suit pocket. He pulled out a small, unmarked vial. He looked over his shoulder, checking the door, checking for me. Then, with a chilling casualness, he unscrewed the cap and poured a generous amount of white powder into my favorite floral mug. He stirred it. He smiled. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It sounded like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the space at once. I saw Cynthia Sterling cover her mouth with her hand. I saw the board members of the charity exchange horrified glances. "That is a lie," Jason shrieked from the floor. "It is a deep fake. She edited it. Technology can do anything these days. Do not believe her." I paused the video. I looked out at the audience. "A deep fake," I repeated. "An interesting theory. But let's add some audio to the visual, shall we?" I switched files. This was the recording from the burner phone, the one Maria had given me. The speakers crackled, and then Sarah's voice filled the room. It was loud, clear, and unmistakable. "Liu lung du de gay ao jack nhẹ thôi. Chỉ cần bác sĩ chứng nhận Elena mất năng lực hành vi dân sự, quyền giám hộ sẽ thuộc về anh. Lúc đó, 50 triệu đô trong quỹ tín thác của nó là của chúng ta." I watched Sarah. She was standing near the buffet table, holding a glass of wine. As her own voice boomed across the hall, describing her plan to steal my fortune, the glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the floor, splashing red wine onto her shoes, but no one looked at the mess. Every eye was fixed on her face, which had gone white as a sheet. The recording continued. Jason's voice, "Tao cần nó trông thật bất ổn trong tiệc gây quỹ tuần tới. Con điên đó uống thuốc đều chữ Sarah's voice, đừng lo. Đến thứ hai, cô ta sẽ bị nhốt trong trại tâm thần, và chúng ta sẽ ban bộ sưu tập tranh ngay lập tức." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I looked at Jason. He had stopped fighting the guards. He was standing still, his chest heaving, his eyes darting around the room looking for an exit, looking for an ally. But there were no allies left. "I am not done," I said. I clicked to the next image. It was a document, a toxicology report from an independent lab in Queenstown, stamped yesterday afternoon. I highlighted the results in red. Scopolamine, I read aloud, also known as the devil's breath. In high doses, it causes hallucinations, compliance, and memory loss. It renders the victim unable to say no. It renders them a puppet. I scanned the crowd, meeting the eyes of the wives, the mothers, the daughters. For 6 months, my husband has been poisoning me with this drug. He convinced me I was losing my mind. He convinced me I was forgetting things. He convinced me I was crazy so that he could parade me in front of you tonight as a broken woman. I took a breath. And why was it for love? Was it for concern? I clicked to the final image. It was the foreclosure notice from the bank, and next to it, the ledger of his crypto losses. $12 million in debt. He did not want to cure me. I said, my voice hard as diamond. He wanted to liquidate me. He forged my signature on a second mortgage. He stole from our joint accounts. And when the money ran out, he decided to steal my life. I turned to the investors. The men in expensive suits who had praised Jason's business acumen just an hour ago were now backing away from him as if he were radioactive. They were checking their phones, likely calling their own lawyers to distance themselves from his toxic firm. "Jason Miller is not a venture capitalist," I declared. "He is a fraud. He is a thief. And he is a man who tried to murder his wife slowly over a cup of tea because he was too much of a coward to face his own failures." Jason let out a guttural roar. "You bitch," he screamed. "You ruined everything." He broke free from the guards. Driven by pure animalistic desperation, he charged up the stairs. He didn't have a plan. He just wanted to stop the voice. He just wanted to stop the truth. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. As he reached the top step, his face twisted into a mask of pure hate. I saw the flash of police badges near the entrance. They had been called by Cole 10 minutes ago. But before the police could reach him, Robert Sterling moved. The older man who had been Jason's mentor, who had toasted at our wedding, stepped onto the stage with surprising speed. He didn't punch Jason. He simply extended a hand and shoved him back. "Get away from her, you piece of filth," Robert growled. Jason stumbled backward. He lost his footing on the stairs. He flailed, grasping at the air, and tumbled down the short flight of steps, landing in a heap at the feet of the crowd. He tried to scramble up, but he was surrounded. The circle of elites had closed ranks, but they weren't protecting him. They were boxing him in. I looked down at him from the podium. The red dress flowed around me like a victory banner. The LED screen behind me still glowed with the evidence of his crimes, a digital billboard of his destruction. "It is over, Jason," I said into the microphone. He looked up at me. His hair was disheveled, his tie crooked. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was a small, pathetic man who had gambled everything and lost. "You wanted a show?" I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that the microphone carried to every corner of the room. I gestured to the police officers who were now pushing through the crowd, handcuffs ready. "Take a bow." The officers grabbed him. This time he didn't fight. He slumped, his body going limp with defeat. As they hauled him up, he looked at Sarah. She was already being intercepted by another pair of officers near the exit. She was crying, screaming that she was a lawyer, that they couldn't touch her. But the look on the officers' faces said otherwise. I watched them drag my husband away. I watched the man who had promised to love and cherish me, the man who had tried to erase my mind, being led out of the ballroom in handcuffs. The flashbulbs erupted again, but this time they weren't taking photos of a society couple. They were documenting the fall of a tyrant. I stood there for a moment longer alone on the stage. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But beneath the tiredness, there was something else. Peace. I looked at the crowd. They were still staring at me, silent, waiting to see what I would do next. I reached up and unplugged the phone. The screen went black. I walked over to the edge of the stage. Robert Sterling offered me his hand. "Are you all right, Elena?" he asked, his voice trembling with rage and sorrow. I took his hand. I felt the warmth of human contact, real safe contact. I looked at the empty doorway where Jason had vanished. "Yes, Robert," I said, and for the first time in 6 months I meant it. I am perfectly sane, and I am free. As the police officers pulled Jason to his feet, the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open again. This time it was not for a guest, and it was certainly not for the press. A phalanx of men and women in dark, severe suits marched in. They moved with the terrifying precision of a government agency that had already built its case. Leading them was a man I knew well, though Jason had never met him. It was Marcus Thorne, the most ruthless forensic accountant and litigator in New York City. Beside him walked Special Agent Miller from the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division. The crowd parted for them instantly. The air in the room shifted from the chaos of a domestic drama to the gravity of a federal indictment. Jason stopped struggling. He looked at the approaching group, his eyes widening as he recognized the FBI insignia on their jackets. "What is this?" he stammered, his voice losing the last of its bravado. "I did not do anything federal. This is a misunderstanding. My wife is sick." Agent Miller stepped forward, ignoring Jason's plea entirely. He didn't look at Jason as a person. He looked at him as a collection of evidence. "Jason Miller," he said, his voice flat and bored, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Conspiracy." Jason laughed nervously, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "That is ridiculous. I am a respected investor." Marcus Thorne stepped forward then. He held a thick leather briefcase. He didn't open it. He just rested his hand on it, looking at Jason with a mixture of pity and disdain. "We have your hard drives," Jason Marcus said. His voice was smooth-cultured and utterly lethal. "We have the servers from your office. We have the chat logs with Sarah Jenkins. And thanks to your wife, we have the forensic trail of the $12 million you siphoned from investors to cover your crypto losses." Jason turned to me. His face was a mask of betrayal, as if I were the one who had wronged him. "You went to the feds," he whispered. "You turned in your own husband." I stood on the edge of the stage looking down at him. The red dress felt like armor. "I did not turn in my husband, Jason. I turned in a criminal who happened to be living in my house." Jason's eyes darted around looking for an angle, a loophole. He was a gambler. He always thought there was one last card to play. His eyes landed on me, and I saw the gears turning. He straightened his spine, trying to salvage some dignity. "Fine," he spat. "Arrest me. Take me to trial." "But you are forgetting something, Elena." He smirked, a grotesque expression on his pale face. "We are still married. New York is an equitable distribution state. Even if I go to prison, I am entitled to half of our marital assets. And more importantly, if the court finds that you are mentally incapacitated during this time, which my lawyers will argue, I still have a claim on your estate as your guardian." He looked at the crowd, raising his voice. "She is unstable. Look at her. She just publicly humiliated me. I did what I had to do to protect our assets. The $50 million in her trust fund is legally under my supervision if she is deemed unfit." A murmur went through the crowd. He was grasping at straws, but he was right about one thing. The law was messy. Divorce was messy. He thought that even if he lost his freedom, he would still walk away with a golden parachute. He thought he could fight me for the money from a prison cell. I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a genuine, amused chuckle. I walked down the stairs, moving slowly, deliberately, until I was standing right in front of him. I signaled for the officers to hold him there for a moment. "Oh, Jason," I said softly, shaking my head. "You really should have spent less time researching poisons and more time reading the fine print of my family's estate planning." I turned to Marcus Thorne. "Marcus, would you please explain to my husband what he is fighting for?" Marcus smiled. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single, crisp document. He held it up so Jason could see the header. It was a deed of trust. Mr. Miller Marcus began his tone professorial. "You seem to be under the impression that Elena's trust fund is a revocable asset, something she owns and controls, and therefore something you can access through marriage or conservatorship." Jason narrowed his eyes. "It is. Her father left it to her. It is her money. It was," I corrected him, "until last Tuesday." Jason froze. "Tuesday. Yes, I said, last Tuesday. While you were at the hotel with Sarah celebrating your premature victory. While you were toasting to my insanity. I was meeting with Marcus in a notary public. I took the document from Marcus and held it in front of Jason's face. I dissolved my personal trust, Jason. I transferred the entire corpus, all $50 million, the art collection, the securities, everything into a new entity. I pointed to the bold letters at the top of the page. The Elena Vance Irrevocable Trust for Pediatric Oncology and Orphan Care. Jason stared at the words. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Do you know what irrevocable means, Jason? I asked, stepping closer. It means I cannot take it back. It means I do not own it anymore. I am just the trustee. I manage it. But the beneficiary is not me. It is not you. It is the Children's Hospital. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees actually buckled and the officers had to hoist him up. The money, he whispered. Gone, I said cheerfully. Well, not gone. Just out of your reach. Forever. Even if you proved I was the craziest woman in America, even if you became my guardian tomorrow, you could not touch a single cent. Because I don't have it. I leaned in close, so close I could smell the sweat of his fear. You tried to kill me for a fortune that does not exist anymore. You committed felonies. You forged signatures. You destroyed your career and you lost your freedom. And for what? I gestured to the empty air. For nothing. You are going to prison, broke Jason. You have nothing. No wife, no home, no money for a lawyer, and certainly no $50 million. Jason made a sound that was half sob, half scream. He slumped forward, the fight completely draining out of him. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw the magnitude of his regret. It wasn't regret for hurting me. It was the regret of a greedy man who realized he had been outsmarted at his own game. I underestimated you, he croaked. I nodded. Yes, that was your first mistake, and it was your last. I stood back and nodded to Agent Miller. Get him out of my sight. The officers dragged him away. This time he didn't look back. He hung his head, a broken man defeated not by force, but by a signature on a piece of paper. As the doors closed behind him, a hush fell over the room again. But this time, it felt lighter. The air felt cleaner. Marcus Thorne closed his briefcase with a satisfying snap. Well handled, Elena, he said quietly. The transfer is ironclad. The papers are filed. He will not get a dime. Thank you, Marcus, I said. I turned back to the crowd, to the investors, the socialites, the people who had watched this drama unfold. They looked at me with a new kind of respect. I wasn't just a victim who had survived. I was a player who had won. I walked over to the buffet table where a waiter was standing frozen with a tray of fresh drinks. I picked up a glass of sparkling water. I raised it to the room. To the orphans, I said, a small, genuine smile playing on my lips. Hesitantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, the crowd raised their glasses. To the orphans, someone shouted. I took a sip. It was cool and refreshing. It tasted like freedom. I had lost my husband. I had given away my fortune. I was technically homeless until the lawyers sorted out the mortgage fraud. But as I stood there in my red dress listening to the applause swell around me, I knew I was the richest woman in the world. I had my mind. I had my life, and I had the satisfaction of knowing that somewhere in a police car, speeding toward the precinct, Jason Miller was realizing exactly how expensive it was to underestimate his wife. The silence that had fallen over the ballroom following my announcement about the trust fund was shattered by a sound I will never forget. It was a guttural, animalistic scream of pure despair. It came from Jason. The man who prided himself on his bespoke suits and his calm, icy demeanor had cracked wide open. The reality that his golden parachute had been burned to ash, that the $50 million he had killed for was now legally untouchable, broke something inside his brain. He did not lunge at me this time. He collapsed. His knees hit the hardwood floor with a sickening thud. He clawed at his tie, ripping the silk fabric as if it were strangling him. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot, filled with a mixture of hatred and terrified confusion. "You cannot do this," he gasped, his voice wet and trembling. "You cannot leave me with nothing. I have debts, Elena. They will kill me. If I go to prison, Broke, the people I owe money to will kill me inside." I looked down at him from the edge of the stage. My expression did not change. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a stranger beg for change on a subway platform. "That sounds like a personal problem, Jason," I said. Agent Miller stepped forward, his heavy boots echoing on the floor. He signaled to his team. 2 agents grabbed Jason by the arms and hauled him upright. He was dead weight, his legs dragging his expensive Italian shoes, scuffing the floor he had walked across so arrogantly just an hour ago. "Jason Miller." Agent Miller boomed, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "You are under arrest." Jason shook his head violently. No arrest. We can make a deal. I can give you names. I know people in crypto. I know the wash traders." Agent Miller ignored him, pulling a pair of stainless steel handcuffs from his belt. The metal caught the light of the chandeliers. "You are charged with 3 counts of wire fraud." The agent continued, snapping the first cuff onto Jason's left wrist. "1 count of bank fraud involving the forgery of a mortgage document. I did not forge it. She signed it." Jason screamed, looking at the crowd for support. "She is lying. She is the crazy one." The second cuff clicked shut, and Agent Miller said, leaning in close to Jason's face, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl, "1 count of attempted murder in the 1st degree. We found the scopolamine in your desk, Jason, and we found the receipt from the dark web marketplace where you bought it." The color drained from Jason's face so completely, he looked like a corpse. The fight went out of him. The mention of the receipt was the final nail. He realized that while he was playing husband, I had been playing detective, and I had been thorough. He slumped in the agent's grip, his head hanging low. While Jason was being processed in the center of the room, Sarah tried to make her move. She had been edging toward the side exit, trying to blend into the shadows behind a large ice sculpture. She was clutching her Chanel clutch so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked like a rat trying to escape a sinking ship. "Going somewhere?" Sarah. The voice belonged to Marcus Thorne. My high-powered attorney stepped into her path, blocking the exit with his imposing frame. Sarah straightened up, trying to summon the shreds of her professional dignity. "Get out of my way, Marcus," she hissed. "I am legal counsel. I have privilege. I am leaving to prepare my client's defense. You cannot hold me here. That is kidnapping." Marcus laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You are not legal counsel, Sarah. Not anymore." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded letter. He held it up. It bore the seal of the New York State Bar Association. "I made a call an hour ago," Marcus said calmly. "I sent over the audio recordings of you conspiring to commit fraud and discussing the illegal involuntary commitment of a mentally sound woman." The ethics committee convened an emergency session. Sarah's eyes widened. She reached for the paper, but Marcus pulled it back. "You have been disbarred, Sarah. Effective immediately. Your license to practice law is revoked pending a criminal investigation. You are not a lawyer. You are just a co-conspirator." "No," Sarah whispered, shaking her head. "That takes months. You cannot do that." "I can when the evidence is this damning," Marcus replied, "and when the victim is Elena Vance." Sarah turned to run back toward the crowd, perhaps to plead with anyone to help her, but she ran straight into a female FBI agent. "Sarah Jenkins," the agent said, spinning her around, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violation of fiduciary duty." The agent grabbed Sarah's hands. Sarah shrieked a high, piercing sound that made the guests flinch. "My hands. Watch my hands. I am a pianist." "You are a felon," the agent corrected, slapping the cuffs on her. The scene in the ballroom had transformed. The shock had worn off, replaced by the voracious appetite of the digital age. The wealthy elites of the Hamptons, the people Jason had tried so hard to impress, the people whose validation he craved more than air, had turned on him. They were not helping him. They were filming him. Hundreds of smartphones were raised in the air, creating a sea of glowing screens. Flashes went off like strobe lights. I could see the screens from my vantage point on the stage. They were live streaming on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. The comments were scrolling up the screens at a dizzying speed. I could imagine what they said. Karma. Monster. Look at him cry. Team Elena. Jason looked up and saw the phones. He saw the people he considered his peers, his friends recording his lowest moment for the entertainment of the masses. This was a torture worse than prison for a narcissist like Jason. He didn't just lose his money, he lost his image. He was becoming a meme, a joke, a cautionary tale. "Stop filming!" he roared, thrashing against the agents. "Put the phones away. Do you know who I am? I am Jason Miller. You are nobody," someone from the crowd shouted back. Laughter rippled through the room. It was cruel, mocking laughter. The agents began to move them. They dragged Jason and Sarah toward the main double doors, forcing them to walk the length of the ballroom. It was a walk of shame that would be immortalized on the internet forever. Jason fought every step of the way. He kicked, he screamed, he blamed me, he blamed Sarah, he blamed the economy. He was a portrait of a man who had never taken responsibility for a single action in his life. Sarah was weeping openly, her mascara running down her face in black streaks, ruining her expensive silk dress. She kept screaming that she was tricked, that Jason forced her to do it. The alliance of thieves had crumbled. They were tearing each other apart before they even reached the squad car. I stood on the podium watching them go. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Robert Sterling. "You do not have to watch this." "Elena," he said gently, "you can go to the back room." "No," I said, "I do have to watch this." I walked to the very edge of the stage. The spotlight was still on me, but I didn't feel exposed. I felt tall. Jason looked back one last time as they reached the doors. He looked at me. He was searching for something in my face. Maybe he was looking for the woman who used to forgive him every time he came home late. Maybe he was looking for the wife who believed his lies. Maybe he was looking for a trace of the tears I used to shed when he called me crazy. But he found nothing. My face was dry. My breathing was steady. My eyes were clear. I looked down at him with the cold indifference of a judge passing a final sentence. I did not smile. Smiling would imply that I enjoyed his pain. I didn't enjoy it. I simply didn't care about it. He was no longer my husband. He was no longer my problem. He was just a bad investment that I had finally written off. I raised my chin slightly. It was a subtle gesture, but Jason understood it. It was a dismissal. He let out a final broken sob and slumped forward, allowing the agents to drag him through the doors and out into the night where the flashing lights of the police cruisers awaited. The heavy doors swung shut, sealing him out of my world. The ballroom was quiet for a heartbeat. Then slowly the phones were lowered. The guests looked at me. There was fear in their eyes, yes. They were afraid of the woman who could orchestrate such a brutal public execution of her enemies. But there was also awe. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of the ballroom. It no longer smelled of Jason's cologne or the fear he had instilled in me. It smelled of lilies and victory. I turned to Marcus Thorne, who was standing by the stairs, a small smile on his face. "Is it done?" I asked. "It is done," he confirmed. "The protective order is in place. The locks on the estate are being changed as we speak, and the forensic team is already at the house securing the rest of the evidence." I nodded. I looked down at my hands. They were not shaking. For months, Jason had told me I was weak. He had told me I was broken. He had tried to bury me. He forgot that I was a seed. I smoothed the silk of my red dress. I was not a victim of a tragedy. I was the author of a thriller, and I had just written the perfect ending. "I am ready to go home, Marcus," I said. "Not to Jason's house, to my house." I walked down the stairs, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. I did not look back at the empty doorway. I walked forward into my future, leaving the wreckage of my marriage in the past where it belonged. The morning after the gala, the sun rose over the Hamptons with a brilliance that felt almost apologetic. It was as if the sky itself was trying to make up for the darkness that had shrouded my life for the past 6 months. The estate was quiet. There were no police sirens, no shouting, and most importantly, no Jason. The silence was not empty. It was heavy with peace. I woke up in the master bedroom, the space on the other side of the bed untouched and cold. For the first time in 3 years, I did not reach out to check if he was there. I stretched my limbs, feeling the soreness in my muscles from the tension of the night before, but my head was clear. There was no fog. There was no fear. My first order of business was not to call my lawyers or to check the news, though I knew my face was plastered on every screen in America. My first priority was justice. Not the grand legal justice that would play out in a federal courtroom, but the personal justice owed to the woman who had saved my life. I walked into Jason's dressing room. It smelled faintly of his cologne, a scent that used to make me feel safe, but now made my stomach turn. I went straight to his sock drawer. I knew his habits. I knew his arrogance. He never threw anything away, and he certainly wouldn't have pawned the Patek Philippe watch yet. He was too sentimental about his trophies. I dug through the rows of cashmere socks until my fingers brushed against cold metal. There it was, the watch he had accused Maria of stealing. He had hidden it right there, buried beneath his vanity, waiting to be found once Maria was safely in jail and I was locked away in a facility. I held the watch in my hand. It was heavy gold and utterly worthless compared to the human life he had tried to destroy for it. I did not call a driver. I drove myself. I took the Range Rover and headed away from the manicured lawns of the estate, driving toward the working-class neighborhood where Maria lived with her daughter and grandchildren. It was a small, weathered house with peeling blue paint and a porch that sagged slightly on the left side. It was a home that had seen struggle, but as I walked up the cracked concrete path, I could smell roasting garlic and hear the sound of a radio playing salsa music. It was a home that had life. I knocked on the door. Maria opened it. She was wearing a faded apron, her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw me standing there holding a velvet box, she gasped and covered her mouth. She looked terrified, as if she expected me to be another police officer come to take her away. "Miss Elena," she whispered, "you should not be here." I did not say a word. I simply stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. I hugged her with a ferocity that surprised us both. I buried my face in her shoulders, smelling the laundry detergent and the comfort that I had been starved of for so long. She stiffened for a moment, and then she melted her arms, coming around me, patting my back as she had done so many times when I was sick. "I am so sorry, Maria," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry." I pulled back and opened the box, showing her the watch. "He hid it," I said. "I found it this morning. The police are on their way to take your statement, but I wanted you to see it first. You are cleared, Maria. They know everything. They know he planted it." Maria looked at the watch, then at me. She didn't look angry. She just looked relieved. "Thank God," she breathed, crossing herself. "I prayed for you, Miss Elena. Even in the cell, I prayed for you." I took her rough hands in mine. "I need to ask you something," I said. "I fired the entire staff this morning. I cannot have anyone in that house who watched me deteriorate and did nothing. I cannot have anyone who was loyal to Jason." I took a deep breath. "I need a house manager, Maria, not a housekeeper. I need someone to run the estate, to manage the new staff I am hiring, to help me turn the place into something different. Something that doesn't feel like a prison." I paused, looking into her kind, dark eyes. "I want to offer you the position. The salary is double what you were making. And I want to give you full benefits, health insurance for your whole family, and 6 weeks of paid vacation." Maria stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. "Miss Elena, that is too much. I am just a cleaner." "No," I said firmly. "You are the only person who saw the truth when everyone else was blind. You are the only one who was brave enough to slip me that phone. You are not just a cleaner, Maria. You are my family." I reached into my purse and pulled out a check. I had written it before I left the house. It was for $50,000, the exact value of the watch Jason had accused her of stealing. "And this," I said, pressing the check into her hand, "is for the roof. I noticed the leak last winter when I dropped you off. Fix the roof, Maria. Fix the porch. Do whatever you want with it. She looked at the check and her knees gave way. She sat down heavily on the porch swing, tears streaming down her face. She tried to give it back, shaking her head, sobbing that she couldn't take it. "Take it," I ordered, using my boss voice for the first time in months. "Consider it a bonus for dealing with my husband. God knows he was a nightmare." She laughed through her tears, a wet, choked sound. "He was very messy, Miss Elena." We sat on that porch for an hour drinking coffee out of chipped mugs, watching the neighborhood wake up. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the heiress in the ivory tower. I felt like a woman sitting with a friend. When I drove away, Maria was waving from the porch and the heavy weight in my chest was gone. I had started to balance the scales. 6 months later. The gallery in Chelsea was buzzing with the kind of electric energy that only happened on opening nights. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, fresh paint, and ambition. Waiters woven through the crowd with trays of champagne and the sound of laughter and deal-making filled the high-ceilinged space. I stood on the mezzanine looking down at the crowd. The exhibition was titled Resilience, featuring works by female artists who had overcome trauma. It was my brainchild, my passion project, and it was a smashing success. Every piece had sold out in the first hour. I took a sip of sparkling water. I didn't drink alcohol anymore. I didn't like the feeling of losing control even for a second. Elena. I turned to see Marcus Thorne walking toward me. He looked dashing in a tuxedo, but his eyes were kind. He had become a good friend over the last few months, guiding me through the legal minefield of the divorce and the criminal trials. "Congratulations," he said, gesturing to the crowd below. "This is incredible. The critics are calling it the most important show of the season." "Thank you, Marcus." I smiled. "It feels right." "How are you holding up?" he asked, leaning against the railing. "Today was the sentencing hearing, wasn't it?" I nodded. It was. I had not gone to court. I didn't need to see Jason one last time. I had sent a victim impact statement, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing my face in the gallery. 15 years, I said calmly, no parole for at least 10. And Sarah got 8. Marcus nodded, swirling his drink. "Justice served." "Yes," I said. "Justice served." But as I looked out at the gallery at the Empire I was building with my own hands, I realized that Jason's prison sentence wasn't the real victory. The real victory was this. It was standing here in a dress I bought with my own money, in a building I owned, surrounded by people who respected me for my mind, not my husband's bank account. I had kept my word. The $50 million trust fund was gone, safely tucked away in the irrevocable trust for the pediatric hospital. I managed it. I sat on the board. I ensured the money went to children who needed it, but I didn't use a penny of it for myself. And I didn't need to. The gallery was profitable. My investments, the ones I made myself without Jason's expert advice, were flourishing. I was living in a smaller townhouse in the city, now having sold the Hamptons estate. I didn't want the ghosts. I wanted fresh air. "You know," Marcus said, looking at me sideways, "there is a very charming architect downstairs who has been asking about you. He bought the large abstract piece in the foyer." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Tell him thank you for the purchase," I said. "But tell him the owner is not on the market." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Still, it has been 6 months, Elena. You are young, beautiful, and successful. You deserve to be happy." I looked him in the eye, my smile widening. "I am happy, Marcus. That is the point." I looked down at the crowd again. I saw women looking up at me, whispering. I knew what they were saying. They were talking about the woman who outsmarted the con artist. They were talking about the woman who gave away a fortune to save her soul. I had become something I never expected, a symbol. I wasn't lonely. I spent my weekends with Maria and her grandkids, who called me Auntie Elena. I spent my days discovering new artists. I spent my evenings reading books in a quiet apartment that was entirely mine. I didn't need a man to validate my existence. I didn't need a husband to manage my portfolio, and I certainly didn't need a partner to make me feel safe. I had learned the hard way that the only person who could truly save me was the woman in the mirror. I pushed off the railing and smoothed my dress. It was black this time, sleek, professional, and powerful. "Come on, Marcus," I said. "Let's go downstairs. I have a business to run." We walked down the stairs side by side. I moved with the easy confidence of a woman who has walked through fire and come out made of steel. The flashbulbs popped as I reached the bottom floor, but I didn't flinch. I smiled at the cameras. Let them take their pictures. Let them tell their stories. I was Elena Vance. I was the curator of my own life. And for the first time in a long time, the canvas was wide open and the brush was firmly in my hand. The future wasn't something to be feared or managed. It was a masterpiece waiting to be painted, and I was just getting started. It has been 12 months since the night of the gala. 12 months since I wore the red dress that changed my life. 12 months since I watched the police car lights fade into the darkness, taking away the man who promised to love me until death, but tried to rush the schedule. I am sitting in my new office at the gallery, surrounded by art created by women who have survived their own wars. The sunlight is streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It is quiet, it is peaceful, but it is not the silence of a tomb, nor is it the silence of a woman who has been silenced. It is the silence of a queen surveying her kingdom. I often think back to that moment in the bathroom staring at the burner phone Maria gave me. I think about how close I came to losing everything. If I had been just a little more tired, a little more trusting, or a little less brave, I would be sitting in a sterile room in a facility right now, staring at a blank wall medicated into oblivion, while Jason and Sarah spent my family's legacy on vacations and bad crypto investments. The line between victim and victor is terrifyingly thin. It is razor thin. And sometimes the only thing that keeps you on the right side of that line is a single moment of clarity, a single moment where you decide that you are worth more than the lies being fed to you. This journey has taught me lessons that no university degree could ever provide. I learned that the most dangerous predators do not hide in dark alleys. They do not wear ski masks. They wear bespoke suits. They have charming smiles. They remember your birthday. They bring you tea in bed. They are the people who sleep beside you, who know your weaknesses, who know exactly where to insert the knife to cause the most damage with the least amount of effort. Jason did not just want my money. He wanted my mind. He wanted to strip me of my agency, my reality, and my very self. That is a violation far deeper than theft. It is a theft of the soul. But I also learned something else. I learned about the reservoir of strength that exists inside every woman. We are taught to be polite. We are taught to be accommodating. We are taught to doubt ourselves, to apologize for taking up space to question our own sanity before we question the men around us. Jason counted on that. He bet $12 million on my politeness. He bet his freedom on my self-doubt. He thought that because I was soft, I was weak. He thought that because I was kind, I was stupid. He was wrong. Softness is not weakness. Kindness is not stupidity. And when a woman is pushed into a corner, when she realizes that her life is on the line, she does not just fight back. She evolves. She becomes something entirely new. I am not the same Elena Vance who married Jason Miller 3 years ago. That Elena believed in fairy tales. That Elena thought love was enough to conquer all. The Elena who sits here today knows that love is beautiful. Yes, but it is not a shield. Intelligence is a shield. Financial independence is a shield. Intuition is a shield. There is a message I need to share with you, a message that I want you to burn into your memory. It is a hard truth, and it might make you uncomfortable, but it might also save your life. Men can betray you. Friends can betray you. The world can turn its back on you. But your intuition, that primal gut feeling that whispers to you in the middle of the night, that never lies. Do not ignore it. If you feel like something is off, it is off. If you feel like you are being gaslighted, you probably are. If you catch your partner in a small lie, do not brush it off. Small lies are often the tip of a very large, very dangerous iceberg. I ignored the signs for months. I ignored the headaches. I ignored the missing money. I ignored the way Sarah looked at Jason. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was stressed. I almost gaslighted myself into an early grave because I was too afraid to face the truth. Do not make that mistake. Your intuition is your survival instinct. It is thousands of years of evolution screaming at you to run. Listen to it. Honor it. Trust it more than you trust any man's words. And here is the second lesson, perhaps the most practical one. Never, ever give up control of your life. I am talking about money. I am talking about access. I am talking about power. It does not matter how much you love him. It does not matter if he is the father of your children. It does not matter if he has never given you a reason to doubt him. You must keep a part of yourself separate. You must have a safety net that only you know about. My mother told me to keep a freedom fund. I used to think she was cynical. I used to think she didn't understand modern romance. But that $10,000 I hid in my winter boot, that was the money that hired the detective. That was the money that bought the burner phone. That was the money that saved my life. Do not hand over the passwords to your soul. Do not sign papers without reading them. Do not let your partner handle all the finances while you remain in the dark. Financial illiteracy is a vulnerability that predators like Jason look for. They want you dependent. They want you helpless, because a helpless woman cannot leave. A helpless woman cannot fight back. A helpless woman drinks the tea. Be involved. Ask questions. Know where the money is. Know your rights. And never ever give the keys to your internal safe or your bank account to anyone, even if that person is sharing your pillow. Love is about partnership, yes, but a true partnership does not require you to render yourself defenseless. Jason thought he could erase me. He thought he could write the end of my story. But he forgot the cardinal rule of dealing with a woman who has nothing left to lose. He forgot that we hold the pen. I took the narrative back. I rewrote the ending. And in my version, the villain does not get away with it. In my version, the princess does not need saving. She saves herself, and then she burns the castle down. I look at the empty chair across from my desk. Sometimes people ask me if I am lonely. They look at me with pity, thinking of the woman who lives alone in a townhouse, the woman without a husband. They do not understand. I am not lonely. I am free. I wake up every morning knowing that the air I breathe is mine. I drink my coffee knowing exactly what is in it. I walk down the street with my head held high, knowing that I faced the devil and I won. There is a peace in that kind of solitude. There is a power in it. I am building a life that is full of art, full of friends like Maria, full of purpose. I am helping children who have no one else. I am mentoring young women to be fierce and independent. I am living a life that matters. Jason is sitting in a cell in upstate New York. He is wearing a jumpsuit that fits him poorly. He eats food that has no flavor. He has no audience for his lies. He has no victims for his schemes. He is alone with the one person he truly hates, himself. That is his punishment. And my reward is simply existing vibrant and alive in a world he tried to banish me from. So I ask you now, you listening to this story, you watching this video on your phone or your computer, what would you do? Imagine it. Imagine waking up one day and realizing the person you love is a stranger. Imagine realizing that the headaches, the confusion, the accidents are not accidents at all. Imagine finding out that your husband is plotting to lock you away to steal your future. Would you crumble? Would you cry? Would you let him win? Or would you find that spark of rage deep inside your belly? Would you find the cold, hard steel in your spine? Would you wipe your tears, put on your best dress, and walk into the fire? I want to know. I really want to know. If this story has stirred something in you, if it has made you check your own bank accounts, if it has made you look at your own relationships with a sharper eye, then I have done my job. We need to talk about this. We need to share these stories. We need to remind each other that we are not crazy, we are not weak, and we are not alone. If you support what I did, if you felt a rush of satisfaction when the handcuffs clicked onto Jason's wrists, if you cheered when I revealed the trust fund was gone, I want you to leave a comment below. Type the word strength. Type it for Elena. Type it for Maria. Type it for yourself. Type it to show the world that you are a woman who knows her worth and will defend it at all costs. And please do not just watch this and scroll away. Like this video, share it with your sisters, your mothers, your friends. Share it with the woman who seems a little too tired, a little too confused, a little too controlled by her partner. You never know who needs to hear this. You never know whose life you might be saving just by sharing a story. We are a sisterhood. We are an army of survivors. And as long as we have each other, and as long as we trust our intuition, there is no tea bitter enough, no lie sweet enough, and no man dangerous enough to break us. My name is Elena Vance. I am a survivor. I am a warrior, and I am finally truly awake. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay safe, stay smart, and never drink the tea.